Hey guys, it's Always Improving here, and today I'm back with the part 2 of my succulent painting. This painting process I've already started. You can kind of see the beginning of it in the top left corner, but now I'm moving on to the second succulent, and I learned a lot from trying to paint the first one. First of all, you can see in this on this succulent, I'm starting with kind of just an overall wash of green. I'm just going in and using a little bit of gradient to add some shadow, but mostly keeping it all one shade. And I think that will really help with the process of this painting the succulent. You can also see that I'm using a little bit of different of a color scheme. For this succulent, I wanted to do somewhat of a more yellow and orange colored rather than the greenish bluish that I had before. So you can see I'm adding a lot of different tones and a lot more yellow to this succulent rather than the other one. Now I'm adding just a little bit of the orange color to the tips. Instead of red, again, I'm doing like an orange color. So I wanted to start incorporating that. You can see I'm still doing it somewhat in sections, but I don't want to focus on one area too much and overdevelop it like I did with the first succulent. I think that was kind of a challenge for me in that one. Now I'm beginning to add more and more shadows and just keep on layering that green color for the shadow and the yellow color and orangish near the tips of the succulent. I tried to keep it where the edges of the succulent were more yellow and more red than the middle, which was more green and more yellow. So that's what I tried to do there, and I added a lot of layers. It was just keeping on with the watercolor, because I feel like that's one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that watercolor takes a lot of layers, and if you get frustrated with it and you quit, usually it's just because you haven't put enough layers on there and you haven't put enough work. Really, what I find for myself, if I stop midway in a piece and don't finish it, I start looking at it and just don't like it. But if I continuously work on it and I keep just adding more color, adding more detail, I end up liking it a lot more, even if I didn't like it in the beginning. So with this process, I really just kept at it, kept working at it, took a break, came back, and I feel like it worked out really well. It was about here that I decided to go in and add a bit more yellow and a bit more detail to some of the leaves, because I felt like it was kind of shifting more towards just like orange and green. So I wanted to add more of a gradient, more of a smoother transition between that orange and that green color. So I added a lot more yellow, and also up until now I left the top leaves, or top, I don't even know, petals, I guess they're leaves, of the succulent. I left those kind of really light and almost just a really transparent wash, but now I'm going back in and adding more color to those now that I've kind of laid a groundwork for what I want it to look like. I wanted to keep them a little bit lighter still to show like the 3D-ness and just some of the values that were in this piece, so I wanted to leave them a little bit lighter, but I also knew that I needed to add some more detail to them before I could call this piece done. Now with those final details kind of pounded out, I decided that I would stop working on the second succulent now and kind of transition over to the third succulent. I didn't necessarily say I wouldn't come back to this ever, but I decided to move on for now. I began the third succulent with, again, a lighter wash. I wanted this one to be a lot more blue and green, like incorporate that, and so I didn't use like any orange or any red. It was all blue, green, and yellow. It was almost a golden yellow too, which I really like. But anyways, so I started out with a really, really light wash of how I wanted it to be, using that gradient of just kind of a blue color to that yellow color, and then added layers and layers again. This one took a lot less time. I think it's because I was getting better at the whole process of just layering on those watercolors and overall just painting these succulents. I feel like with the practice I got from the second one, it was a lot easier to do this third one, and I really like how it turned out, but again, I just kept adding layers and layers and layers and working that gradient transition. For some reason in this third succulent, I felt that it was a little bit desaturated, and so I worked a lot on adding a lot more color to it. So in the layers that I did, there were a lot more blue and a lot more yellow that I added. But at this point in the painting, I wanted to kind of zoom out just to show the full thing together, and I also started working on just a lot of little details that I wanted to fix up before calling the piece finished. I worked on the top one, adding a lot of shadows and a lot more saturation. And the second one, I added a lot more green and a lot more shadows as well. And again, with that third one, I just added a lot more saturated colors and tried to keep it lively. But I felt that even with all those changes and these three giant succulents, I felt it was too much white space. So I ended up adding a fourth succulent to this image, a smaller one, and almost like it wasn't fully bloomed. But I decided to make it the same-ish color scheme that the bottom left one was, because it was the smallest, and so I thought that adding another one similar to it would help tie it to the piece. But I did it a little bit differently. I started with a flat wash of just blue, still trying to keep it lighter at the tip so I could add a different color. But I just started with blue, and I think that simplified things a bit so I could get the shadows down before worrying about all the color combinations and things such as that. But yes, this succulent was a similar color scheme to the blue and green one, and blue, green, and yellow one, but I just started more so with blue and added the yellow later. So the shading for this fourth succulent, all I did, it was quite simple actually. So again, I started with the blue and then worked in that contrasting yellow color just on the ends, on the little tips of the succulents. And then I just blend those two together, adding a little bit of green to kind of give that nice gradient with that succulent. And I think it turned out well. The shadows weren't quite dark enough with the first layer, but that's okay. I went in with a couple more just like the other ones, taking a lot of what I learned from the other three that I have done and working in with this one to make this process go a lot faster. Now, as the final change for this piece, I went in and zoomed back out and added a lot of shadows and a lot more detail to just all over the painting. I felt that some of the succulents were lacking that shadow and that really like a lot of value, so I wanted to add some darker shades where it would add some depth to the image and also just finish up some of the smaller details and fine work that this piece needed. And here it is, guys. This is the final product, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. So this is going to be a 22 by 22 piece, but I haven't cut off the edges yet. I'm going to wait to do that just because I don't know exactly how it's going to be framed yet. And yeah, so I'm really happy with how this turned out. I really like all the colors, and I'm just going to sign the piece while I outro this video. So I really hope you enjoyed watching it, and if you did, please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel to see more of the artworks that I produce, and thanks so much for watching. Bye!